Nobody saw it coming. Not the analysts, not the investors, not the journalists who spent the last 5 years writing Toyota's obituary in the EV race. While the world was watching Tesla's stock price and counting BYD's quarterly shipments, Toyota did something quiet, something that didn't break the internet, something that, on the surface, looked like just another car launch. But it wasn't. The Toyota bZ4X Touring B just launched in Japan. And if you think that's a boring sentence, you haven't been paying attention to what's actually happening underneath the surface of the electric vehicle market. Because this launch isn't really about a car. It's about a company that spent years being laughed at, called outdated, accused of protecting the past, making a move that might rewrite the next decade of transportation. Toyota might have been right all along. Let's go back a few years. The EV revolution was catching fire. Tesla was printing money. New startups were announcing cars that existed mostly in renders. Governments were setting zero-emission deadlines. And every week, some analyst would publish a piece asking the same question. Why is the world's largest automaker still talking about hybrids while everyone else is racing toward an electric future? The criticism was loud, and it wasn't entirely unfair. Toyota was visibly cautious. It kept investing in hybrid technology at a time when the industry narrative said hybrids were a stepping stone, not a destination. Some called it conservative. Some called it arrogant. A few called it deliberate. Turns out, deliberate was the right word. What Toyota was watching quietly from the outside was an early EV market doing what early markets always do, making promises it couldn't fully keep. Battery degradation was a real problem. Range anxiety wasn't just psychological, it was mathematical. On cold days, service networks were thin. Software updates sometimes broke things that were working fine before. The excitement was real, but so were the cracks. Toyota had seen this before, not with EVs, but with hybrids. When the Prius launched in 1997, nobody thought a hybrid car could be reliable over a decade of real-world use. Toyota proved them wrong. Not with marketing. With engineering, with a kind of unglamorous, obsessive attention to thermal systems and battery chemistry that doesn't generate headlines but does generate trust, and that, experienced 20-plus years of it, exactly what Toyota brought to the bZ4X Touring. But this only matters once you see what they actually built into that battery, and why the choice they made is either the smartest long-term bet in the industry, or the one thing that could hold them back. Every EV conversation eventually comes back to the same word, battery. Because the battery isn't just a component, it's the promise. It's the reason people hesitate. It's the reason people convert. And it's the place where most EV makers play it fast and loose with the truth. Here's what typically happens. A company announces a range figure. It sounds impressive. Buyers buy in. Then, 2 years later, 3 years later, the range starts to drift, not catastrophically, but noticeably, and the owners start doing the math. They start wondering if the car they bought is slowly becoming less than what they paid for. Toyota built the bZ4X Touring around a different obsession. Not what the battery does on launch day, but what it does in year 6, year 8. Year 10. The battery pack is lithium-ion, which isn't new. But what Toyota engineered around it draws directly from its hybrid bloodline. Decades of real-world data on how batteries behave under stress, how heat kills cells slowly and silently, how aggressive charging cycles shorten the gap between new and worn, how thermal management, keeping a battery in its ideal temperature window, is the single most important factor in long-term performance. The bZ4X Touring has an estimated real-world range of around 452 Wb/km. That number isn't the most aggressive in its class, and Toyota knows that. They aren't trying to win the spec sheet war. They're trying to win the 5-year ownership war, the kind of war that doesn't get covered because stability doesn't generate clicks. But here's what nobody is saying yet. The implications of this engineering philosophy go far beyond one model. If Toyota can prove in the real world, over real time, that its EV batteries hold up better than the competition, the entire conversation about EV reliability shifts, and the brands that built their reputation on range numbers suddenly have a much harder question to answer. That question hasn't been answered yet. The bZ4X Touring just launched. The test has barely started. Now look at the car itself. And pay attention to what Toyota chose not to do. They didn't give it a radical silhouette, no dramatic floating roof, no flush door handles that confuse you in a parking lot, no interior that looks like it was designed by someone who wanted to erase every familiar surface. The bZ4X Touring looks like an SUV, a well-proportioned, confident, slightly upmarket SUV, and sitting next to a Tesla Model Y or a futuristic BYD concept. It almost disappears. That's not an accident. That's a strategy. Toyota has spent decades studying how people actually adopt new technology. Not how early adopters adopt it, they'll buy anything that feels like the future. But how the cautious majority adopts it, the people who aren't excited by disruption, the people who have families, long commutes, unpredictable schedules, and a deeply held belief that a car should just work every single time, without requiring them to become an amateur technician. For those people, the biggest barrier to EVs isn't the charging infrastructure. It's the feeling that they're being asked to join an experiment, that they're beta testers for someone else's vision, that the car they're about to spend $40,000 or $50,000 on is still figuring itself out. Toyota designed the bZ4X Touring to eliminate that feeling. Familiar form, familiar proportions, familiar sense of solidity when you close the door. But underneath, fully electric, clean, quiet, future-ready. The technology is radical. The experience is anything but. It's a Trojan horse, and it's aimed at a demographic that Tesla has never been able to fully convert. Not because Tesla isn't impressive, it clearly is, but because impressive and trustworthy are not always the same thing. This is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. For the rest of the industry, Toyota isn't launching the bZ4X Touring to steal Tesla's customers. That's the wrong frame entirely. Tesla's customers want a tech experience. They want autopilot. They want over-the-air updates. They want the car to feel like it's evolving. They've accepted that ownership sometimes means navigating software quirks or waiting weeks for a service appointment. That's a trade-off they've consciously made. Toyota is going after the customer who hasn't made that trade-off, the one who looked at an EV and thought, not yet. Not because they don't care about the environment, not because they don't understand the technology, but because they've seen what happens when companies move faster than their infrastructure can support. They've watched friends deal with things that shouldn't be problems, and they decided to wait. Toyota's entire launch strategy with the bZ4X Touring is built around one message. Even if they never say it this directly, you don't have to compromise to go electric. Starting in Japan isn't arbitrary. Japan is Toyota's proving ground, but not in a lab sense. Japan is where real people with real expectations put real miles on new technology. If the bZ4X Touring earns trust there, not excitement, trust, it signals something much bigger. A global rollout built not on hype cycles, but on verified, lived experience. That's a different foundation than most EV launches have ever had. And if that foundation holds, the ripple effects are significant. Toyota has distribution in markets where Tesla barely exists. It has service networks in countries where EV infrastructure is still being built. It has brand recognition in places where the name on the car matters as much as the technology inside it. The bZ4X Touring, done right, isn't just a product. It's the opening move in a very long game. But there's a real tension at the center of all this, a philosophical one that doesn't resolve easily. Tesla believes the car of the future is a software product. It gets better over time. Features are added, systems are refined, the experience evolves. The car you buy today isn't the car you'll have in 3 years. That's the pitch. And for a certain kind of customer, it's genuinely exciting. Toyota believes the car of the future is an engineering achievement. It should be right when it leaves the factory. It should remain right for a decade. The experience shouldn't require you to install an update to fix something that used to work. The promise is stability, not evolution. Both philosophies are coherent. Both have real appeal, but they cannot coexist in the same product without compromising both. Toyota has made its choice, publicly, structurally, irreversibly, at this scale.